Hello, everyone. My name is Rafal, and I'd like to welcome everyone to my headshot and portrait photography podcast. Today, I have very special guests. Chris Bach is in the house. I'm super excited to have you in the show because your work is truly amazing. The people you work with, we will go through some of those um, iconic images you've created. To be honest, let me start with the story. I've been following you for quite some time, and I was kind of scared even to reach out to you because like your work you do is truly amazing. And I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna shoot quick DM to you and see if you would be even interested to talk to me. And surprisingly, you just respond fairly quickly, and I was just like, wow, that's truly amazing. So thank you for joining. I have tons of questions. I would like to go through your work with some of your images you have created. I want to talk a little bit about your story when it comes to getting into this whole photography world. So, but first of all, I just want to say thank you, and yeah, I truly appreciated you find the time to work to talk to me.
Oh, I'm glad you reached out. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with just the basic question. Tell me a little bit more about your story getting into the photography, because like I know based on my experience, every photographer has kind of own story. There are people who they've been passionate about photography whole their life, and they slowly kind of get into it. There's people who have been doing completely different things, and one day they discovered that, what, I see something there, and there's some passion, there is some interest, and they get into photography. So tell me a little bit more about your story.
I'm always intrigued by there's this expression, do what you love.
Hmm.
But there's a kind of flip of that that I think might be more powerful, which is love what you do. Now, the difference is that do what you love, you have a passion for something and you move towards it and you do it. But the fact is that, just because I'm interested in something doesn't mean I have a talent for it
Hmm.
or that there's a marketplace. And so I guess I thought about it somewhat sort of. I thought about it in a kind of thoughtful way. I'm using the word thought twice in a sentence. It's an abomination. The I was always good at art in school. Is one of the few things I was any good at was visual arts.
Hmm.
And I went to mostly academic school, so there weren't really a lot of art courses. But it's one of the things I excelled at, and so I kind of knew I was going to be in that realm in some way as an adult. Um, but over time, I really was only interested in pop culture, rock bands, movies. When I was younger, it was more stuff like Star Wars or the band Queen. And then as I got older, I got interested in more kind of adult kind of material, and then and then also moving towards things like more interested in the directors than the actors, or
Hmm.
more interested in politics rather than pop culture. And as I got older, I kind of my tastes expanded. But I really would have loved to have been in music, but I had no musical talent. So I really recognized that I need to work in a realm where I had some ability and some talent. And so I need to work in the visual realm.
Hmm.
And that's how I got into photography. But I photographed pop culture figures. So
Hmm.
that's kind of how I combined my my ability in the visual arts and then my interest in pop culture, and then merged them together to become a pop culture photographer.
Hmm. So tell me a little bit more about why did you choose portraiture? Because there's, as we know, there's all sorts of different genres of photography. People shoot landscapes. They have passions for different ones. So what kind of um, push you towards portraiture? It was something special, or that was just a kind of like.
Well, they say that, half of photography is what you put in front of the camera.
Mhm.
And I had no interest in the other realms. I mean, frankly, I wasn't even really interested in photography. Like photography was not really. I kind of fell into it kind of by accident. So I was really interested in the subjects, which was rock stars and movie stars and things like that. So it was really all about the portraiture. That was really the only thing that interested in me. Over time, I got to shoot other things just because assignments came along, and I
Mhm.
was curious to explore them. But really, portraiture has been my only interest, and it's really what I'm good at. I mean, I have a fairly easy way with people. I'm genuinely curious, and I at the same time I don't mind kind of going against the grain a bit and making images that I think are interesting. That maybe not all subjects would be, kind of interested in being portrayed that way, and that's kind of okay with me.
Hmm. Well, your images are definitely different, and then we're gonna go through some of them, and I want to hear the big story because we've talked a little bit prior this interview that people just nowadays they just scroll through things, right? They see image and they just move on,
Sure.
but there's always bigger story behind it. How so? But before we get there, you've paved your way into working with like we talking about celebrities, musicians, politicians. Can you tell me about that journey getting into this world? Because as we probably know, it's not easy. And then in working with those people is something that every photographer, it's a kind of photographer dream, right? So can you tell me a little bit about this path? How did you kind of slowly get into this? So started with the pop culture, and then you started slowly navigating towards different type of portraiture. Can you tell me a little bit about it? Because I've seen it when I go even through your website, and then I see some of the, like, you have variety of people who are just from completely different industries,
Sure.
and somehow you got into this world and you were able to not only just you were able to photograph them, which is just another like big accomplishment, which I think it's just something I would like to discuss with you.
Well, my role models when I was starting out were people like Arnold Newman, Irving Penn, um, and then maybe more of a more contemporary Anton Corbin from Holland.
Mhm.
So it's Anton's was a music person, but the other ones they kind of made a point of shooting a wide variety of people from different realms. They're
Mhm.
portrait photographers, but they were, especially Arnold Newman, I guess, really was the kind of not just the work, but the career. Like I want a career like his, where I was
Mhm.
shooting a wide range of people in my style,
Mhm.
and to have a large body of work that goes over decades. I mean, I remember looking at his work when I guess probably when I was in my last job, and there was a book of his. It was his book of artists, and it was a picture of Joan Moreau, and he had one picture from the 1940s. It was like
Mhm.
1941 or something, and then another one from the 80s. So he photographed the same artist 40 years apart,
Mhm.
and it was really cool. And both pictures were really great. And I was like, yeah, that's it. This is in these two pictures. This shows the path I want. I want to be able to do this for decades, making good work that aligns with my taste and my interest. And
Mhm.
that was my north star through my whole career. And I'm on it now. I'm on my 37th year now
Oh, wow.
of doing it. And the reason you're seeing such a large, wide array of work is because I've been doing it a long time, but with a certain amount of focus. I do lots of different things. I do commercial work. I do lots of work that's not really celebrities at all, but I always kind of come back to the celebrity thing because it's been an ongoing interest of mine.
Mhm. So tell me a little bit more about your creative process. This is something what really interests me because each image which you produce has kind of, well, not different taste, but has some kind of thought behind it. Can you tell me a little bit more about like your creative process? You let's say you have scheduled some kind of photo shoot um, with high profile person, and like, do you kind of prepare for the shoot? You have some kind of thoughts, ideas, some concepts you would like to implement, or you kind of go with the flow and you try to kind of work with whatever you have available at that moment? Can you tell me about that? Because I'm kind of interested, the as I said, the creative process behind some of those images, how they come to existence. And then my second portion is like, how do you choosing those final shots?
Sure.
It's a process of like something which touches you deeply, or there's like you something see it there which you cannot even explain sometimes. I would like to discuss that with you as well.
So I think if you're seeing that the work, isn't hitting the same note over and over again, it's because I'm just I'm just eternally unsatisfied. I
Hmm.
think that's sort of, both frustrating, but also been really a gift that, you know, I'm proud of the work I've done. And
Hmm.
certainly I've done a few like awesome pictures over
Hmm.
the years. But in general, when I see my work, I just see what could have been or what's wrong with them.
Hmm.
Even the ones that are successful and like legendary, I'll be like, yeah, I know, but I wish we could have got X, like, or I was really going for Y. So I'm kind of eternally unsatisfied. And I think that's why I'm always trying to make things that are different than what I've done before.
Hmm.
It's, I kind of never think the work's quite good enough. So it's, it's a gift and a burden. What can I say? But, but yeah, I do a lot of preparation. I research the subjects if I can.
Hmm.
Obviously, I get client direction. I often go to locations beforehand if I can.
Hmm.
So I really like to know as much as I can about the subject and the environment and the circumstances and the expectations as much as I can beforehand. And then I really go in with like over a dozen ideas. And
Hmm.
oftentimes, like one of my big part of my process is I sit down, I just write down anything that comes to mind for the subject, even things that I kind of know perfectly well are unshootable, just things that are just odd or violent or sexual. Like I really try to like let the unconscious come onto the page
Hmm.
because I really do think that one, great ideas that are pretty weird will
Hmm.
actually be like possibly usable and
Hmm.
actually can come up. Occasionally I'll do something that's pretty outside the box. Like think of Billy Bob Thornton peeing on the backdrop.
Yeah,
Like
actually, I picked one of those shots. Yeah.
so, like that that is something literally that's pretty out there that I was actually able to get on the page,
Hmm.
in the photo. But usually it's more like some kind of moderated version of my extreme idea that is it just ends up being feeling like unique and novel and interesting. Part of the thing too is that I feel I'm particularly challenged by the visual aesthetics part of
Hmm.
photography. I kind of categorize. I'm really after two main things. I'm looking for a strong dynamic visual, so color, tonality, composition, light and shadow, negative space, all those things. I'm looking for something dynamic in that way, but I'm also looking for a sense of an authentic moment coming
Hmm.
together, a sense of a real something that feels like that puts the viewer in the moment and feels like dynamic and exciting in that way. I feel like maybe the more authentic stuff happens more in the moment, so I
Hmm.
kind of prepare less. But maybe it's also maybe I have a kind of a finer tuned radar for that, so I feel like I need to prepare more. I just feel like I'm more lacking in the visual stuff. So this thinking about lighting and environment and color, I really think about that stuff more up front because I
Hmm.
need to kind of get it in place because on the shoot I'm kind of more focused on the moment.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I'll go in, I kind of prepare, and then when I'm on site with the subject, I'm now moved into a space of being more open. So
Hmm.
the location could change. I could see a lighting opportunity. I could so something the subject does. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Do that again. Like I think that's how I try to approach so that I try to maximize preparation and then maximize opportunity of surprises and accidents that could happen that
Hmm.
are magical.
Yeah.
And I think that my work at its best is a combination of those two.
Hmm.
And then when it
So,
comes to, you asked also about how I do an edit. Do you want me to answer that or do you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
ask me
absolutely.
that?
Yeah, for sure.
So obviously on set, I'm trying to, like, I shoot a lot of volume. I shoot multiple setups. I
Hmm.
shoot hundreds of pictures on each shoot. But I'm also trying to move towards, on every shoot, I'm really just trying to get 3 great photos. So I
Hmm.
might shoot 5 or 6 setups, but really it's towards the aim of even just if I can get 2 shots that are like awesome and just just super dynamic and exciting and feel fresh, then I'll be very happy. And there'll be other things in there too that work or that are more valuable to the client, and that's great. But I'm really aiming towards like 2 or 3 great shots that feel like dynamic and exciting and novel. So I'm really, as I'm shooting, I'm evaluating, are we getting closer to that? You know, are we getting something that feels like just really like surprising even to me? Like, are they just something that's awesome? Like, oh my God, this is so cool. Am I getting close to that? And so I'm always sort of watching and moving towards it as we're shooting and watching the flow and the dynamic and seeing possibilities and opportunities. But at the same time, I also recognize that probably the best shots in the session are going to come up, are going to be things I find as I do the edit later, the next day or 2 days later or whatever. So when I do my edit, I might mark a few things while we're shooting. Just if it looks good, I'll just mark it with a 1, 1 star. And then when I go to do the edit later, I go through and then I go marking things like 2 stars for anything that's not any good at all. And then I go through the 2 stars and the 1 stars and then go narrow down to 3 star. For 3 stars, I'm like, okay, what's really going to be in the edit? What am I really going to show the client? And so I really just narrow down to like the 3 stars. So those 3 stars might be like 35, 50 pictures. I really want to get down to about 20. So I go through the 3 stars and narrow down, like maybe there's a few frames that are alike, and I just want to narrow down to the one that is the best of those, say, 5 frames. And then I'm really whittling down. And then finally, when I get up to the 5 stars, I'm really just getting down to like the very best of the best. Maybe I'm evaluating like, stuff that's good, but maybe like, I'm really worried the client's going to pick it, but it's kind of a bit lame. So I just take it out. Also, I'm very aware of the fact that clients usually come back and ask to see more. Okay. I give them like a sampling of all 5 setups, but they're going to come back and say, hey, this setup and this setup, I want to see more. Is that okay? And then I want to have held back some, so I've got great shots to show of those setups. I don't know how helpful that is. I think that I want to give stuff that clients going to be delighted by, but I also really am thinking like I want to really showcase the pictures that I think are the best of the shoot, that really feel like they fit within what I do as my whole general aesthetic.
So that leads me to my next question. So tell me a little bit more about connecting with your subject, because that's, I think, the key component of getting the shots where you're looking for. And it seems like, your images, they have some really interesting ideas behind it. And can you tell me, like, how you building that trust? Because I'm guessing, most of the time you haven't chance to meet these people before. And so you have to just like literally right on the spot, get this deep connection with them so they can trust you. So whatever ideas you have in your mind, you are able to execute it. So tell me about building that trust with your subjects.
So I tend to think of it as, if I have an idea for something, I just ask. There's no real like theatrics that go into it. But as I've thought more about it, because people do ask this question, how do you get people to do kind of unusual or surprising things? And now, I don't think my pictures are that kind of shocking or whatever, but I do think oftentimes I kind of go in with kind of crazy ideas, but I kind of deliver them with a light touch. So I think they feel accessible and approachable and fun rather than being kind of a gotcha thing, which I think when people ask like, oh, how'd you get that? It sort of feels like I'm tricking people into things. And that's not what it feels like on set. And I don't think that's what it feels like in the ultimate images either. I think they feel like there's a collaboration and there's a kind of synchronicity between me and the subject. And we're making something that feels like smart and fun and, and just a little mysterious and kind of narrative. Anyway, so when I think the first thing I've realized is that there's so many things to my practice that I take for granted. For example, the fact that I just deal with people and situations in a professional way. So I'm on time. My set is tidy. I usually scout beforehand, which sometimes people hear about. The fact that I research people, so when I meet a subject, I'll reference things in their story or even previous interviews that will that they'll be really surprised by. I mean, I remember I photographed Pete Wentz from Fall Out Boy, and he was obviously on a junket for a new project, and he said, "God, you know more about me than half these interviewers." And I think the subjects don't necessarily expect the photographers to know that much or to be that schooled on their story. Or like I photographed the band Interpol, and I made a point of learning all their names, which to me just seems like basic onset protocol.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than saying, "Hey, you in the blue tie, go over here," I was saying, "Carlos, you switch with Paul," and then da da da. And they're like, "Thank you." Like at some point, 10 minutes in, Paul said, "Thank you for learning our names." Half the people at the record company don't know our names. And so I think little things like that make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I research people. Initially, I research them to kind of get ideas for pictures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stories from their narrative, their interests or whatever might kind of spark an idea. But I've realized they're actually more valuable for making conversation. I remember when I photographed the elder President Bush, and I was an adult when he was president. So obviously I knew his story. I knew the narrative behind, his presidency, but I researched him anyways. And God, there's some amazing nuggets in his story that I was able to bring up when I was actually with the president. And it was only 25 minutes together, but there's definitely some quiet moments where I asked him questions about things. And I mean, not only was it like it built kind of a bond, but it's also fascinating to hear his answers.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I asked him about President Nixon because, Nixon had really asked for other Republicans to support him as he was fighting the Watergate scandal. And George H.W. Bush really defended him and really supported him. And yet in the end, when it turned up that Nixon had a whole cover up and that, he was sort of actually behind the scenes, sort of, knew about the break-in of the McGovern office and all that stuff, he felt really betrayed. So I actually asked him about it. I was like, what was your take on President Nixon? He obviously was a complex and very intelligent man, and yet he had betrayed your trust. And, we chatted about it. It was kind of amazing to talk about another president with a later president. And it was sort of great to get his take, like just on, and it was a great conversation. And amazingly, my assistant actually had filmed it. So actually, if you look for it, we can link to it. There's footage of me asking him about President Nixon, which is pretty crazy. So I think these things make a big difference. Another thing, when I ask people to do things, or just in my general attitude, I'm genuinely excited to be there. Like, I whether it's a famous person whose work I know, or it's a regular person, I'm genuinely interested in people. I want to know their story. I'm happy to be there with them. I'm excited to just kind of hang. I don't know. It's very simple. And, the funny thing is that, when I do my edit, I really try to be focused on what works for my body of work and for my audience. But when I'm with people, my enthusiasm is genuine. I'm really excited to be there with them and engage and have fun and, make conversation or whatever it is, And so if I present an idea that's a little outside the box or is a little strange on its face, I think people take it for what it is, and they might say yes, they might say no. And when they say no, I'm ready with another idea. I mean, that's another thing is I've got literally 20 ideas, and 5 of which are the weird outside the box pictures,
Absolutely. So right now,
but let me just finish that. I think that it sounds so easy when I say you just have to ask, but I recognize that it's actually very, very difficult. And the fact is, it's difficult for me too. You when you went through my pictures there's the one of Kavi Zahidi, the filmmaker. I had this idea of getting him naked or close to naked. I wrote it in my notes. The only direction from the client was make it not boring, which is one of my favorite directions ever. And as soon as she said that, I'm like, well, I think you have to get him naked. And so So I was just beside myself. This is a shoot from about 5 years ago, and I was like, how am I going to ask this guy? And eventually, I was like, have been shooting for an hour already. I'm like, I just have to ask. So I just said, hey, are you wearing cool underwear today? And he's like, oh, yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm like, we should shoot you in your underwear. And he's like, okay. He's like, oh, my socks are pretty cool too. In fact, I have these other ones. Let me change them. And so we shot him in his socks and underwear, and it was pretty awesome. And of course, the client was delighted. It was for the Times Magazine. And it kind of reset a long run of great work I did with them for the last 5 years. This is some of my best work really of that period has been for the Times Magazine. And it was really sparked by that one shoot where I just went all in and just was like, I'm getting this guy down to his underwear. Like I'm just doing it. And I really, it was hard for me to ask. It was hard for me too. So I think you have to recognize it's not like it's easy. It's hard to do. It's hard to ask for those sort of oddball shots, but when it pays off, it's gold. And it's like, it's those shots that are the cornerstone of my reputation. So it's, even though I might get those more quiet shots that are like a nice studio shot or just elegant looking, that's fine. And those are great to have as well. But, having like, a dozen shots that are those like, how did he do that shots, really, they really make a big difference. And I will say too, that people will be just like, well, you're Chris Buck. Of course you can do that. But most subjects don't know who I am. And I've always been like this. It's not like I kind of reached a certain point of status in the industry, and then suddenly I was like, well, now I'm Chris Buck and I can ask for whatever I want. It's not like that. You are who you are, and you lean in hard pretty early. Once you figure out your little like thing that you want to do, that you just do it. And look, the fact is that 80% of subjects say no to all those ideas, but the 20% are the ones people see. Like that's it, is that people only see the wins. And I think that, you might find it like disappointing or heartbreaking or even humiliating when people say no to you, and, you got your assistant there and they see you flailing or whatever, but no one else sees it. And it doesn't matter,
Yeah. Well, that was kind of like, my next question, how you can find the balance between, pushing those ideas, because we all know in photography, those crazy ideas, as you said, they're usually winning images, right? And I know everyone wants them. It's just the question how we can get there, right? How we can push it, or how we can ask, or how we can create this environment where the person is trusting you enough with your ideas and say, hey, yes, I'm willing to do that, especially with those like really crazy ones. And I'm not saying crazy ones in a meaning that
I know what you mean.
kind of off the charts, but it's something that it's different, something where they have to feel a little bit uncomfortable to do this, right?
Part of it is a mentality, and that when I go to shoot, and this has always been my approach, I'm trying to make the best pictures I can make today. Now, obviously, it seems like, well, who doesn't do that?
Yeah.
But what I mean is, I'm willing to put everything on the line. I'm willing to piss off his publicist, even piss off potentially my client. I'm willing to annoy the subject and have them leave angry or leave early. Now, look, obviously, I'm always polite. I'm always professional. But this is a mentality. In my head, I'm like, I don't care what they think of me. I don't care if they like the shoot. I don't care if they like the pictures. I'm not trying to, my agent will be like, I mean, this is all my agents, not even my current agent. Hey, you're shooting this movie star, getting good with them, and maybe you can shoot their next movie poster. Because that's how it kind of works in Hollywood, is you get in good with their publicist and with them, and they're like, hey, I like this Chris Buck. He should shoot our next poster. And then, suddenly like you're greenlit from the most powerful person in the room, and you get the job, right? And I love to do those jobs, but I'm not going to sacrifice the shoot I'm doing today to get on chummy with the subject that might, be the next shoot. I'm not saying I don't care, but I'm not willing to sacrifice, because it's so hard to get a great shot today that I'm going to remove any obstacle I can to get that shot. And so I don't care if people like me. I don't care if the subject is a little annoyed or if it doesn't lead to other work with them. I don't even care if they blacklist me. I will do whatever I have to get the shot.
Mhm. Well, that's fascinating, because I'm interested, like especially when you're talking about, pushing those creative ideas. And how much, because also I think it's just the balance between you and the subject, right? How much they allow you to push it, right? And as you said, some people they're more open, but 80% or 90%, you said people say no to those ideas. And the question is, how you can navigate through this whole process to get what you want at the end of the day, right? Which I'm guessing it's not really easy. So tell me a little bit more about, I want to know a little bit about the timing, because usually based on even my experience, and I didn't work with such a high profile people like you did, but tell me a little bit more about the shoot itself, how this whole thing looks like. Are you getting most of the time the amount of time you want, or you work with like, very short period of time and you have to execute something very, very quickly? Tell me a little bit about those experiences working with those people.
Well, of course, it varies greatly. I mean, it's you know, the standard time tends to be 2 hours.
Okay.
If it's a cover or a major thing, then maybe 3 or 4.
Mhm.
But that could include like hair and makeup too,
Okay.
and wardrobe fitting and all that. So, but it varies a lot, depending on who it is and how much they exert control over things. They might be like, well, I've had shoots where hair and makeup is like, they're doing hair and makeup for an hour and then doing the photo shoot for half an hour.
Oh
And
wow.
I'm
Okay.
like, what is this priority? But, I've actually talked to some subjects who become friends and they're like, you know, um, the hair and makeup matters a lot. If you're, especially if you're a woman and you're a little older, you want to look your best, you'll be judged. And I don't dispute that.
Mhm.
So you want to look your best and you want people to focus on the things you want them to focus on and not on like whatever, your inconsistency in your skin or something, or your hair looking funny. So I get that. I try to be sympathetic to it. I think that stuff matters less to me. It's less
Mhm.
important to the images than to some people. So I tend to not prioritize it, but I don't think they're wrong. It's just not where my head's at. But
Mhm.
anyways, I think more important to me than the shoot time, I can work with anything over 20 minutes or more. I find I can work with, but the prep time matters more. When I
Mhm.
photographed President Obama, it was like 3.5 minutes shoot, and we did 3 setups, which are kind of variation on one thing. We kind of started close and moved back, but it was 3.5 minutes, and we got lots of good images to work with, which was fantastic. But we had lots of prep time. We had like a good, 3 hours or so to come in and like load into the White House, set up, have a bite to eat, then wait for the president to come, and then we shot. And
Mhm.
so, that meant that when that 3.5 minutes happened, we maximized every second.
Okay. Perfect. So my next question is, what I meant to ask you about. Hmm, I'm trying to kind of rephrase that. You know what? I don't know. This whole thing just kind of slipped from my mind. But let's jump into some of your images. I want to just kind of I picked some of the ones which I was really inspired and I really loved them. There's some high profile people, and I would like to hear the story behind the shoot.
Sure.
Some maybe stories, something which kind of brings a little bit more flavor to the image. So let me kind of bring that up, and I want to basically start. Let's start with this with Leonard Cohen. Tell me a little bit about this shoot. What was your experiences? If you could just, I don't know, add some little bit of story to the image.
Sure. So it's really rare that I photograph someone who is a genuine hero of mine. I mean, maybe I've done a dozen in my whole career. So that means like whatever, every 4 years on average, maybe even less than that.
Mhm.
And so, but Leonard Cohen was one of them. And so it was really intense and scary to go photograph him. I did my usual process, which I've already talked about.
Mhm.
It's funny when I was there, we had a chance to set up, kind of look around and set up before we worked with the maestro, and I was sitting at this little kind of dining table he had, and I was, kind of going through my notes. I'd already kind of walked through his home. This was in Los Angeles, and he comes and sits with me, and he's very Leonard Cohen like, very kind of dapper and low key, and he said, how's it going? I said, oh, it's good. Yeah, it's good. I'm preparing. Look, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan, and this is really important to me. And it's important to me that this goes really well. I'm really hoping to make a truly exceptional image today. There's a pause, and he says, well, if you're meant to make something great, there's nothing in this world or any other that can stop that from happening.
Wow.
He says, well, if you're meant to make a poor image, there's nothing in this world or any other that can stop that from happening. And I look at him like, thanks a lot. And he gets up and leaves. So we did the shoot. It's funny, when he came in, he was very relaxed. He was like making some breakfast for himself, and he was like frying an egg. So he's leaning over. He's dressed like this, but without the hat on. And he's hunched over with this, literally like a hunchback. And he's like, hey, boys. He's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Hey, want some eggs? And I'm, oh, no, sir. We're good. Thank you. And so, we prepared, and then we did the shoot. But after the shoot, he's like, I don't know, at some point in the shoot, he said, after the session, I'll make you guys lunch. And I'm like, okay. Leonard Cohen's going to make me lunch. That's awesome. So he made lunch for us. He's like, oh, I went to the Jewish deli this morning. He said the chicken liver is very good. And I was like, well, I'm not going to say no to that. So I had chicken liver, and I think I had a pastrami on rye. But yeah, so he made us lunch. I guess maybe it was part of his Buddhist practice of like serving others. I don't know. It was very strange, but awesome. I was kind of naughty in that even though we had a strict 2-hour time limit, I took some Polaroids of him making lunch for us.
Oh, wow.
And that was pretty sweet. I think he was kind of annoyed by that, but he put up with it. And yeah, so that's Leonard Cohen.
Perfect. So before we jump to the next photo, this is something what I actually want to ask you before, and just kind of like my mind got a little bit twisted. Tell me a little bit about choosing the final shots, because from one hand, I know you're working with creative directors, with agents, with magazines, you name it. So how this process look like when it comes to picking those final images, to basically, I don't know, publishing them, whatever. Do you have some kind of your input into it, or you just providing bunch of shots? Okay, this is what you guys can work with.
Sure.
Because I'm guessing, this is reflecting your work, and your name is kind of stamped on those images. So you want to also have a little bit of control about your style, about, the type of images just going to the world. Tell me a little bit about this process, because I'm very interested in how this look like on your end.
Well, when it varies. Certainly for editorial, I give a pretty tight edit between like 12 and 25 pictures. And then when I send them to the client, I will say, in the note or written note, I'll say my favorites are, and I'll list 2 to 4 images, right? And this one. And then they choose what they like. Now, as I mentioned before, they'll sometimes come back to me and say, hey, can we see more of this setup? And I'll send like a few more of that setup, and maybe a couple other things or whatever. I try to be respectful. I want to drive them towards the ones I like. I never give images I don't like. If I really don't like it, I don't give it to them. I mean, oftentimes I'll meet young shooters and they'll express frustration at what gets run. And this is kind of my final step in my edit, is I'll look through and say, are there any of these pictures that I'll be annoyed if this is the one they choose? Because inevitably they will choose the worst picture you gave them. So you have to, you can't give them a picture and then say, well, that's not the best one. You have to choose this other one. Whatever you give them, they're going to choose the one they like. And inevitably it's the one you like least. So You give them what you give them, and they choose what they like.
Mhm.
Usually, if they run 3 pictures, they'll run one I don't like so much, or one I don't care for as much, and then a couple I like fine. Maybe like one I love, maybe it'll be one of the 3 I've mentioned, and then one that's okay, and then one that's like a less favorite, but it's fine. Obviously, I'm fine with it. That's why I give it to them. People, I think, they get pulled by this sense of like, I want to show them I shot a lot, or I want to show them I shot a lot of variety. And so they'll show them things that they don't want them to run, but they're trying to show, hey, I shot range. But if that range goes into the area of things that are a failure, then don't show them, because they're going to choose them. When it comes to commercial work, then I give them everything. They're paying a commercial rate. They get access to everything. But obviously everything is up to 1,000 images, and that's a lot to throw at a client. So I will then give them either a list or a folder of JPEGs of my favorites from each setup. So in that case, it's really just a courtesy. I do not expect them to choose what I like. I'm honestly surprised when they do, because they just have a different kind of viewpoint and a different agenda than I do. And that's fine. They're paying commercial rate. I want them to be happy. But the fact is, with editorial, occasionally they'll run things the way I like. It'll be like really dynamic and awesome, but I really don't put much stake in it. I learned a long, long time ago that you can't have your ego or whatever be dependent on what they run. Like they run what they run, and that's fine. I did a portrait book of my celebrity work about 6 years ago, and people would say, "Oh, is this an outtake?" And I'll say, "No, this is the shot. The magazine ran the outtake." Because what I like is really the shot. I mean, there's plenty of my pictures that people know, and they don't know what ran in the magazine. And those pictures, the ones that ran the magazine, are long forgotten. The ones that I show are the ones that live on. Not always, but often. Those are the ones that are known. They're the ones I show.
Absolutely.
The picture, my best known picture is a portrait of Chris Farley by a window. And it's by far my best known picture. In fact, it's totally disconnected from me now, which is fine. It's a show of its strength. And that picture was not run by the magazine. In fact, they never even saw it. It was so different than their ask, I didn't even think to show it to them. And so that's my most iconic image by far, and yet the client never even saw it.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Okay, so let's jump to the next amazing portrait. Let's talk about photo shoot with Paul.
Yes, Paul Giamatti. Do you have a question about it in particular?
Well, the reason I picked it, because he's one of my favorite actors ever. Everything what comes out with him is a gold.
Yes.
And I've seen some interviews with him, because I've been following some other stuff when he has some stuff where he kind of talks about his career, his life, whatever. And he seems like a very genuine person, and that's why I picked this picture, because there's a bunch of movies which I could watch over and over and over and over again, and I never get tired of this actor. It seems like he has something in him that is just so magical.
Yes.
That it's even hard to describe.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would like to kind of hear your story about working with him, how this whole experience was for you. This is pretty interesting image, so I would like to kind of, if you could give me a little bit of I don't know, story, how
Sure.
this image come to existence, where this idea came from, and just I want to know, just in general, your experience working with him, because I would like literally do anything in my life to have that opportunity in my life, for sure.
Yeah, of course. So it's funny, because I'd seen him around New York a few times over the years, because he lives in New York and I did at that time live in New York. And so I'd see him around, and he kind of like looked like this, kind of like that kind of just kind of slightly annoyed or whatever, grumpy, but kind of weirdly approachable at the same time. Like he seemed like it wasn't egotism. It was more just, it wasn't directed towards the public. It was more just directed towards life. That was the vibe you got from him. I never talked to him, but I'd kind of see him around a couple of times. So when the shoot came up, I was very excited. I mean, Sideways is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I rewatched it actually after the shoot because I just was excited to watch it again. So you know what's funny is he was exactly as you say. He was very chill. He sees himself as a working actor. Like he doesn't see himself as a movie star. And
Okay.
so he just seems very appreciative of any kind of attention or any kind of opportunities for work. And obviously, you know, he's done a range of work from, you know, supporting roles to small roles to leading roles that are, you know, suit him or and are high profile to ones that are kind of below him in his abilities, I think. Like, and so he's very he appreciates the opportunities he gets. And so that's his vibe.
Mhm.
I mean, we talked about Sideways because I was a fan, and we talked about it for a long time, and I was like amazed that he didn't mind talking about it. You know, he told me a few stories, and he talked about the like Merlot thing and all that, and it was really fun, and it was just fun just hanging out with him. And we talked about New York a lot because we both lived in New York, you know, at the time. But okay, on to the shoot itself. The This is one of the things where the you know who he was and what they wanted from the shoot were very different,
Mhm.
and his people or the publicists were like no props, no conceptual, just a straightforward studio portrait. And but my client was GQ and they were in my ear. It was Justin O'Neill, who's a great photo editor, fantastic to work with. And like me, he wants to push it. He just wants the best picture today, and he doesn't care what the publicist thinks. I
Mhm.
mean, working for GQ is great because they're like, yeah, we're GQ, like fuck off.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we had these props, and he's like, oh yeah, let's do this. And then Paul's just like, oh God, no, no. And just it was really like all the whole time. It was just like us pushing for these kind of goofy conceptual things. Like they're smart, but they're still kind of silly.
Mhm.
And and Paul just pushing back. I mean, oh please don't do this to me. Like it was the whole time. And then we want to get outside. I pre-scouted this spot. It was around the corner from the studio in Greenwich Village, and there was a balloon tied in front of a. It's kind of tied in front of a little store, like a shop. And Justin's like, "Get the balloon! Ask for the balloon! Where to get the balloon?" I'm like, "I don't know." There's a shot actually by Anton Corbijn of Danny DeVito with a balloon that kind of made me think of that, and I was like, "I don't
Mhm.
want to do like something that feels like I'm doing a knockoff of Anton." And I was like, I don't know about this. But Justin's like, yeah, we're gonna do it. So he went in and grabbed the balloon. He's like, okay, I got it. He comes out all excited like a 12-year-old kid. He's like jumping for joy. He's like, oh, we're gonna do Paul with the balloon. I'm like, okay. And so we get around the corner. Paul's actually sitting on the apple box. And he's like, I'm not doing the balloon. Don't give me the balloon. And I'm like, just for a minute. No, 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 no. And the publicist give me the stink eye. And I reach over and I give him the balloon. And then I jump back behind the camera and start shooting. I literally shot for like, I'd be surprised if it was 30 seconds before the publicist took
Wow.
away from him. And but we got the shot, and it just nails it because he's genuinely like, I don't want to do this. It's sort of funny because you you get that sense of him being that awesome Paul Giamatti like guy who's like just like a kind of a sweet, decent man, but also that sense of like, why are you doing this to me? Like, why are you humiliating me like this? But and yet too, like you look at the picture and it's so joyful, and it straddles that thing of being like we've made him uncomfortable and he's really like genuinely annoyed, but also he kind of knows it's going to be like a killer awesome image. Like I mean maybe he doesn't know, but as an audience you see it and you're like, thank you for doing this. Like it's worth those, you know, whatever 25 seconds
Yeah.
of like, you know, being mortified.
Yeah.
But in the end, and it also too, it feels different enough from Anton's image to be like I'm okay with this. Like it has its own life separate from that Danny DeVito shot that I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
And it's, you know, one of those things where like it's almost too much of a Chris Buck picture. Like it's almost too much like what I'm known for. But
Mhm.
you know, Justin was really right to push for it, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of like it in a way. Like you know, you sort of start off saying how my images feel all very different, and it feels like I'm always keeping it fresh. And this is in a way why I was a little hesitant about it. It almost
Mm.
feels too much like what Chris Buck would do,
Mhm.
but it's such a home run and it just works. And it's like, it's undeniable. And I have to show it. In fact, I did a Kickstarter video for that book and I went back to this location and shot a ton of footage of me we bought a balloon like this. And there's footage of me with the balloon kind of recreating this image that
Mm.
was equally works magically. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've obviously embraced it.
Yeah. But don't you think putting, these people in this uncomfortable situation like this just push them to, create those amazing face expressions? Because as you said, he
Yeah,
really looks annoyed by this, but at
totally.
the same time it's just so honest expression. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
so real that, I think that's what makes this image so special.
Do you have any particular question around it?
Just tell me again. I would like to know the experience working
Sure.
with
Well,
Robert.
this was actually my 5th session with
Mhm.
RFK Jr., Robert Kennedy Jr. I first photographed him in 1995, and this is from, I guess, maybe a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So, honestly, the biggest challenge was doing something that I hadn't done before
Mhm.
because I'd gotten amazing pictures with him, and I really, I wanted to top myself. So, in a way, like doing type portraits is not something I am naturally inclined to do. It's sort of not what I'm known for or anything. Certain photographers who like that's like their bread and butter. That's a staple of what they do. But for me, it's not like that. So I
Mhm.
thought it'd be fun to try to do that with him. He's obviously got an amazing face and it's gotten better as he's gotten older.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to do something with this that just had a sense of being, almost like Clint Eastwood, kind of like staring you down, like at a spaghetti Western or something. So that was
Yeah.
kind of the vibe I was going for.
Yeah, and that's why I choose this image because it's powerful. Like his face expression, just looking at it, just kind of suck you right in.
Oh,
So that's
thanks.
why I picked that. So, yeah, perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the next one.
So I mentioned the Billy Bob
Yes.
peeing on the backdrop before. This was an amazing shoot where we did, I don't know, like 4 or 5 setups, and like 3 of them were great.
Hmm.
This was the first one we shot, and yeah, I don't know. I just had this idea of shooting him in Elizabethan costume. When maybe it's more like at the French court. I don't know, but it's funny when I got this assignment. I was like, well, Billy Bob Thornton, he's like a crazy badass. Like we're just gonna like get together and we're gonna riff and we're gonna come up with awesome stuff.
Hmm.
And then I kind of gave it a minute and I'm like, you know what? I better write down a couple ideas beforehand.
Hmm.
And so I did that and I came up with a bunch of ideas, and that's where the idea of being in the backdrop came up from a previous shoot where I thought of it. I was on location with a subject who was a businessman, and I thought of that idea, and I like, but I can't. Having this businessman is not going to be the right read to have him peeing on a backdrop. So I saved it for a future shoot, and that ended up being Billy Bob.
Perfect. Well, I love this shot. It's
Thanks.
really interesting, and yeah.
So we hung a black seamless in a hotel room so that
Mhm.
he could be in environment and studio at the same time.
Yes. Well, like perfect. Okay, let's talk about this particular shot.
Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Dogg. Yes.
Did you find this on my website?
Yes. Well, some of the website I also went through your Instagram.
This is from Instagram. Okay.
Yes.
I don't really love this picture. That's why I
Okay.
ask. I would not show this on my website.
Okay.
It's a bit kind of obvious. Snoop
Mhm.
Dogg with a dog. It's a bit kind of on the nose, as it were.
Okay.
The thing I remember about this shoot was that the dog was the alpha and he was just a member of the pack.
Hmm.
For a guy named Snoop Dogg, he didn't seem to have a lot of control over his own animal.
Oh wow. Okay.
Hopefully he doesn't come after me. But he was cool. The shoot was supposed to happen on one day. That's his house behind.
Hmm.
And then we showed up and he was out and he didn't come home till dark. So we had to reschedule for the next day. So I had to move all my flights and all that and come back the next day. Because we had to come back the next day, he was very good with his time and very flexible because we, he kind of had screwed us over. So that worked out kind of well. And he was very great. He was great. Like I showed up with some high quality gin for him because of his iconic track, Gin and Juice. And he laughed and he's like, I really appreciate this. I'll take it. I'll share it with my friends, but I can't drink this stuff because it makes me nuts.
Sweet. Okay. Let's go to some interesting stuff.
Yes, Dennis Hopper. This was like 5 minutes in a hotel room. And I did the classic, like available light. I'm basically, my back is against a big picture window looking out in the street. And he's right in front of me, and like on the other side of a desk or something. And he made a face, kind of a goofy face, and kind of giggled. And I was like, do that again, but don't smile. And so he kind of pushed his shoulders up and kind of bugged his eyes out a little bit. And I shot it again. And I got this amazing picture. And to me, it's like, this is in 1990 and Blue Velvet had come out in 86, so 4 years before. And to me, it felt very Frank Booth from Blue Velvet. And so I was excited about that because I love that movie.
Yeah, it's a stunning shot. And again, that's what we said. You just really step out of the box, it's not like a regular portrait where you just like, just pose someone and get the shot. It's something that.
Well, after we did it, he's like, what are you doing here? You're trying to get like a Joel Peter Witkin picture? You know who Joel Peter Witkin is?
Yes, I've heard of him.
Yeah. So so I thought it was kind of funny. And I was like, oh, Joel Peter Witkin, because Hopper collected art and photography. So he really knew his stuff because Witkin was like really blowing up at that time. So I thought it was very funny that he said that. And I was like, yeah, Witkin's awesome. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so let's jump into some more icons.
This is a Bono lookalike.
Okay.
It's not actually Bono.
Okay.
So I did a whole series of celebrity lookalikes.
Okay.
And I actually shot with this guy, Pavel. I shot with him in New York. We did this big conceptual shoot. It was for a series I was doing for Maxim magazine. So we had a regular series in the back page of the magazine of celebrity lookalikes. And we did this whole elaborate shot with him. And then I didn't really like them. I thought they were a bit overdone, kind of too conceptual. Okay. And so I wanted to do something simpler. So we met up in Los Angeles where he was living at the time. And we did these shots of him at Starbucks. And I thought it'd be funny to have Bono having like an oversized, super sugary Starbucks drink.
Okay. So now we're going to get to some interesting shots.
Yes. Well, this only gets more and more interesting as time goes by.
Yes. That's why I chose that image.
To me, it's like this picture is a great example of like go all in every time because you don't know which ones are going to matter. You really don't. And, obviously occasionally you photograph people who are already super famous or iconic. But a lot of times, a lot of my best pictures or most sort of kind of wow pictures are ones that are someone who's like notable, but not really like iconic yet. But I go all in. I shoot them as if this could be the most important shoot of my life. And in this case, this was shot in 2006.
Okay.
So, he was doing The Apprentice. The Apprentice was a big hit show, but he was kind of like a reality TV kind of businessman personality. And he was fun. And he's like I'd shot him before. So I knew what he was like and he was fun to shoot. But it wasn't like I thought of him as being like an amazing kind of get, And so, but I always try to get something for myself. I did these kind of conceptual shots with him. And then it's shot in the conference room in Trump Tower. And I'd been there before. So I knew they had these sort of narrow slats of a mirror as a kind of design element. And so I thought it'd be fun to shoot him with that, where it might break up his face in the reflection. And so at the end of the shoot, I had an 11 by 14 envelope for him and I gave it to him and he opened it and he saw it was a picture of himself from our previous session. And he's like, oh, what's this? And he's sort of both surprised and delighted. And I said, I'm looking to, kind of buy 5 more minutes with you. And he's like, sure.
Mhm.
And I think he was flattered that I, was thoughtful enough to bring him a print. And so we did this. We just shot one roll of him with the mirrors and with available light just coming way down across the room. It
Mhm.
took like 5 minutes, and then he left, and I got this amazing shot.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, then 10 years later, he was president, and you know, this, the kind of visual of him being a man of many faces became real.
Mhm. Well, that's why I think this image is really iconic. And I think that, as you said, some of those images you're creating, but the story itself is going to unfold with the time. And I think
Totally.
that's what happened here. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few more to go. We're going to go to different one. This is another of my favorite actor. So tell me about this image, and then, the idea behind it, how this whole thing kind of comes to life.
So this was for the New York Times Magazine. It was for a cover.
Mm-hmm.
So doing any kind of magazine cover is a different beast because it's not just about making great work. It's about checking all kinds of boxes. You need the space above, you need room for text, there's just so much more on the line.
Mm-hmm.
You genuinely have people from editorial weighing in a way that you don't as much for inside the magazine. So this was working for the Times Magazine, and they came to me. It was after that shoot with Kavi Sahidi, where they were like, "We love that you do funny and weird, and we want to do something like that with Seth Rogen." And we had all these ideas, and I did multiple rounds of pitching ideas to them. I mean, I had like 8 pages of like single line ideas written out for him. And but we kept going back and forth, and with his people and what they wanted, and the magazine kept changing their mind. Not in a bad way, but just it was in a way it was sort of a little fast and loose because there's so much creative going on. And the editor I was working with, Amy Kellner, is fantastic and really like we really connect really seamlessly in a way that's really powerful and leads to such great work. It
Mm-hmm.
was really like fun to do that project. But we were on set and we had the flowers ready and we had a prop stylist who could work with that stuff. And it was really crazy. And we were kind of deciding the morning of like, okay, we're going to do something with the flowers, but what exactly? And I was like, well, we could make like a wreath of flowers on the ground and have him lie in it, or we could build him like a head piece, like in
Mm-hmm.
Midsummer, the movie. Like, and so we kind of were like, what are we gonna do? And we're like, the clock is ticking down, we're losing time. And finally we decided, okay, we had sort of this chicken wire fence and we looped the flowers into it and then cut a hole for Seth Rogen's head. And that's what we ended up doing, as well as a couple other things on location. And he was great. Like obviously he's a really great performer, and once he's there on set, he just really delivers. And it was a lot of fun, and he's very funny, and it's just a great day. It was weird because it was sort of kind of near the end of COVID time, so I was wearing a mask, and I was taking the mask down so we could connect and you could see my face. But we had like this COVID like protocol officer or whatever was like, "Put your mask back on." I'm like, "Oh, okay, sure, we can all pretend that matters."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I mean, whatever. But it was a great shoot and an iconic cover, and I'm very proud of it. I kind of feel like in recent years I've been trying to do this thing where like, because in a way I built my career on doing these kind of quieter, kind of, kind of smart, witty images that
Mm-hmm.
are a little bit mysterious and surreal. At my best, at least, that's kind of what I've always gone for. But I've tried to see if I could do something that kind of can be more dynamic and more pop, but still not lose the Chris Buck kind of weirdness.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this image is a pretty good rendition of that, where it has the dynamic kind of pop quality that is like a real crowd pleaser, but also feels like my work.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, that's what is it's really interesting what you're saying that like, and I don't want to say in the kind of wrong way, but I think adding this weirdness to the images, that's what brings the real flavor, right?
Totally.
That's what kind of makes the image pop, makes you stop, makes you think, analyze it, and just kind of enjoy it more. There's no
Well,
question.
I want there to be a narrative, but I want the narrative to be a little open-ended and not really like, Anton Corbijn I mentioned was a big favorite of mine, and I had a chance to meet him and interview him just after I left college. And one of the things he talked about was you want the image to be open-ended. So when the viewer looks at it, they they finish the work. They kind of have their own narrative of like where this is going and what it means. And I think that I realized that's one of the things I loved about Anton's work, but other photography in general, that there's a narrative suggested. There's something going on, but you don't know what it is. And I think that that's what makes it exciting is that ambiguity and that mystery and the sense of like the audience is actively involved in the photograph, and it's not just delivered finished in a box with a little bow on top.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump to the next image, to the younger generation, Mr. Beast.
Well, I'm curious as to why you chose this, so tell me about that.
The reason I chose, because he's a big YouTube star, right? One of the most popular one. And I was not really familiar with what he does, but I have a 10 years old son, and he's like all over this guy. And I know he's not only extremely successful as a YouTuber, but also as an entrepreneur. He's done a lot of projects which helps people. And then one of the, I'm sure you've heard about his story where he was helping people with people who have problems with vision, and that's one of this video which really hit me.
Yeah.
That he's not one of those people who is trying to, I don't know, just he's trying to do something positive, right? And the stuff what he does, it's really impactful. It's really something that touches your heart. And then I remember when I watched this video with my son, like that was just amazing, right? And that's why he kind of win my heart.
Yeah,
and then when I saw him, that you had a chance to work with him, that's why I chose this picture.
Well, this was for a cover of Time magazine, and the challenge for me was, because it was Time and their audience is older, we need to kind of really make it clear what he does. That if it said like Mr. Beast, blah 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 blah, we need to really show him like this guy makes videos, and so that's why he's with a video camera. I mean, initially we had a giant pile of like, I wanted something that was more kind of visually dynamic. So you had a giant pile of gear, and he is on the top of it. But we didn't really have the personnel to build that safely without like potentially having the whole thing fall down. And so I was like, let's go simpler. Like, when in doubt, go simple. And so what we did was we just got down to one camera, and we did a bunch of stuff with it. And at some point I think I said like balance on one foot. And I kind of got this little moment here that feels a bit more kind of like my work. And I like that the camera's a little obscured by his hand, so you can see it, but it's still not the main thing. And his expression is great. And even like there's a kind of grace to his gesture that is really nice. I agree. I think that he's a really interesting kind of the next wave of creativity. That is really, in a way, he does what we do, like very open-ended, very like intuitive. And yes, he's kind of gamifying the algorithm and stuff, but there's a lot of real genuine creativity in there too. It's not just math and statistics and whatever. It's a lot of like trial and error and just kind of instinct stuff. So I have a lot of respect for him as well.
Well, I 100% agree with you, and then I know there's two, opposite sides. Some people love him. Some people, have different opinion on him. And even, like what was shocking for me when I was like listening to some of those opinions when he was like helping people, and we're talking about thousands of people, and people were still like, complaining that, he's doing this for publicity, whatever. But just the fact he using those resources to do something positive, you cannot really question that, because there's not that many people who have willingness to do what he does, right? So as I said, I have all respect for him, and that's why I chose that photo, because the young generation knows him really, really well, and I think he does a lot of positive stuff. Okay, let's jump to, we have a few more, well, 3 more, and then we kind of can wrap this up. Tell me about working with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, so as you know, like shooting with a major icon like Tom
Mhm.
Hanks is pretty freaky because
Okay.
what you need to do is like remember like so when you're dealing with a celebrity of this magnitude, you really have to just focus on doing your job,
Mhm.
and it's really just about like I don't shoot with A-list people like this that much. So when I get that opportunity, I want to maximize it and make, it may not be the best picture of my career, but I want to be unique. I want to feel like, ultimately, I want to feel like it's a Chris Buck collaboration with an icon. That's really what I'm going for.
Mhm.
When we did this shoot, funny enough, it's in Los Angeles, and we were shooting in a studio. Stars of this level, they don't really let you take them outside the studio because it's just, they're just, the guy's a household face and name. And so, but of course, I just want the unique aesthetic of being outside, and outside the studio were these kind of weird plants. And so we did this studio shooting. And then, maybe like for the last setup, I was like, hey, let's go outside. And just because you got the rhythm,
Mhm.
he just was like, sure. And then we went out there, and maybe someone who drove by was like, hey, Tom, or whatever. But other than that, it was totally, without drama. And it
Mhm.
was a great shoot, and he was very cool. And as per his reputation, he's very personable. I brought him a copy of one of my books, and he was like, oh, this is so nice. I'm going to give it to my wife. She's a photo buff. I'm like, great. And he's like, I'll send you one of my books, but I don't have them with me, but I'll send it to you. And I'm like, okay, great. Not really think much of it. You know, 3 weeks go by and his book arrives signed to me referencing the shoot. And I'm like, wow, that is some follow through.
Perfect. That's amazing story. Okay, so let's finish our image. Pick your images, kind of like stories. Tell me a little bit about our last image, working with Barack Obama. You
Yes.
said you
So,
mentioned a little bit that you had like very limited time, but tell me your experience, how you felt about this whole process, getting that shot.
you know, like with the Tom Hanks, it's you just focus on the job, right? Like when you're doing a politician, they don't tend to do very much. So
Okay.
there's a lot of thought about environment, lighting, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's for a cover, so I wanted a simple background shot as one of the options. Um, but what was interesting was my client said, cover off what you need, but if you see a Chris Buck shot in there, go for it.
Hmm.
And what happened was we kind of pre-cleared the general approach with the White House. So the first setup was a tight headshot that was straight on, and the second one was kind of three quarters, kind of heroic, kind of looking away. And
Hmm.
then the fourth setup was pulling back and seeing the whole scene with the seamless and the lighting and also the environment of the White House, space. So we did the first setup, we move on to the second one. We're doing the shot, and he's looking great, looking away, kind of heroic and majestic. And I said, sir, hold your head position, but look with your eyes to the camera. And he looks at me and says, I don't do that. And I snap the shutter.
Hmm.
And that's this shot.
Wow. Well, you nailed the face expression. There's no question about it, and that's what I also picked that shot because it's not his typical image, and I
Right.
think
And
that's what kind of
I
separates his
but
image from
it's
everything
I just feel like it's still a picture of a president, but it kind of feels like there's a little Chris Buck in there. Like
else. Hmm.
you like we just got to him a little bit, like it
You
just
sneak that in.
there's a sense of connection. Like you get a sense of like him and I having a little moment, like like I know what you're thinking, like that kind of vibe.
Mhm. That's amazing. And it's amazing you're able to kind of as I said, like slipped it in some one way or another and get something which is different,
I
right?
mean, just this is one of the things Arnold Newman said was luck is preparation plus opportunity.
Hmm.
And I really think that's so true. That when things have gone my way, Like, look, the fact is that you can go out and you can like nail it 9 times out of 10, but it might only be that 10th time that you nail it. And that thing leads to so many opportunities. Like you could be doing a great job and no one notices, no one notices, no one notices. And then you do something and you do a great job. And somehow that's the thing that takes you to the next level of your career. You just don't know which one it's going to be.
Yeah. But basically what you're saying, push the boundaries as much as you can.
And I think you just want to do a great job on every shoot because you don't know which are going to be the ones that are iconic. In a way, like I photographed 4 presidents, and I think the best one is the Trump one. It's just, it's a next level picture in a way that, like, even if it wasn't of Trump, it would still be an interesting picture. And that's how you know it's great.
Perfect. Okay, so I know we just went a little bit above the time. So, I'm so appreciated that, you were willing to even push this a little bit more. But I'm extremely thankful for this conversation with you. Thank you for sharing all these stories, all your, this amazing experiences you went through. Because I think a lot of photographers out there, they would like to be in your spot and, had opportunities, the ones you had, but you worked really hard to get there. It's not as easy as, a lot of people think. But sharing those experiences is something that I think gives people like kind of different look at the industry we are in, right? And how we have to work, how we have to approach certain things, and then what makes the best shot. So I truly appreciate it.
Well, people often ask me, how do you get to the position where you can shoot those kind of celebrities?
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, this is what I've always done, even when I had no particular, I had no reputation, I had no portfolio. But what I did do is I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to shoot pop culture icons.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I wanted to do. So having that laser focus meant that I could find those people and then maximize those opportunities where they came through, right? So I was really into music. And in the mid 80s, when I was starting to work, I would see what bands are coming to town. And because I liked, kind of underground music as much as the mainstream music, I'd see bands that are coming to play just like a big nightclub. And I'd go and I'd, through the booking agent or the promoter, I'd get some kind of access, maybe meet the artist during sound check and ask them, can I make your picture? And, like the majority of the time it would be like no or come back. And then it would lead to no. But again, you only see the wins. People only see the things that are successful. So if you put the time in and, let's say half those shoots are good enough to show, if you do this for a few years, then you can build a portfolio of good work that you can show to now start getting commissions from legitimate clients. Mm-hmm. But it really was about being laser focused on, like I remember talking to my teacher and I'm like, I want to shoot movie stars. He's like, well, they often do plays. So go to the dressing, the backstage door and wait till they come out. And then ask them if you can have 2 minutes on the street to make their portrait, or ask them if you can shoot them in the dressing room. If they see you there multiple days, then finally they'll be like, this seems like an okay guy. I'll let him come to the dressing room for 5 minutes. You do that enough times, then you can build a portfolio. And that's how I did it. And I think that people think people are not accessible, but I disagree. Things are different now than they were then, but not that much. If you know what you want, you can do some version of what you want. It might be the kind of the lo-fi version or the kind of lesser stars, but if you do a great job with it, you can build a portfolio.
Absolutely. So before I let you go, I would like to ask you, and we talk a little bit about it, so people can learn from you, and then you organizing some tutorials, you putting some workshops together. You told me a little bit before we start. Can you tell me a little bit more details about it, how people can learn from you?
So I've been doing workshops, for like over 10 years. And more recently, I've been doing them more regularly. Mm-hmm. And out of the workshops, I got this idea of starting, I call it an accountability group. Mm-hmm. It's so far, I've only invited people from the workshops or former assistants and interns, people kind of within my circle already, but I'm expanding it now to anyone who's interested, it's called Checking Focus. And it's a group where we meet once a month online, and I give assignments. We discuss quandaries and questions. I'm really an open book about process and my experience. But the assignments are really fun and challenging. And, the people really respond well. And like over half the people shoot the assignments every month. And so we review them and talk about what worked, what didn't, what's challenging about them. And the assignments, they have value in and of themselves, but they really are about changing the way you think about your practice and your methods and your attitude towards your work. Our last assignment, for example, was to steal an idea. So people often get kind of uptight about like, oh, I don't want to do this. It might be like someone else. There's a famous quote, great artists steal, good artists borrow. And I was like, the reason why great artists steal is that they take an idea and they truly make it their own. Now it's theirs. And they reappropriate it in a way that's so uniquely their own, and it's no longer borrowed. You now just own it. It's now yours. You're not giving it back. In a way, when you borrow, it's like an homage. You're doing something as a nod to something else. When you steal it, you're making it something new and fresh. And ironically, I use that Paul Giamatti picture as an example of a time when I stole an idea from someone and made it into my own. And so the group is really great for really just engaging people and keeping those synapses firing and really like making people make new work. But it's more like getting people connected to a community of like-minded, serious shooters and holding them accountable to high standards of making great work.
Absolutely. So we will link all this stuff to this podcast so people can check it out. They can connect with you, and then if they're interested to join, they can.
The way to join is through Substack. So it's a Substack group called Checking Focus.
Okay, we'll link all this information. I'll put everything so people can check it out. Hopefully they can join and learn a lot of good stuff from you, because it seems like you're packed with all sorts of amazing experiences and then amazing knowledge, and the fact you were willing to share with other people, that's pretty
well. It's a really fun and open, like very welcoming group, but also I genuinely do want people to push outside their comfort zone. That's really the key thing of it, with my workshops and with the Checking Focus group, is to really challenge you, to challenge your preconceptions and your obstacles, and help you to move those out of the way so you can make better work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris, for your time. That was truly an honor to talk to you. As I said, I'm a big fan of your work. As I said, you've created stunning body of work, iconic images, and I'm sure the legacy you're leaving behind it's gonna last for many, many years to come, and people are gonna enjoy those shots through in the future, right? So because you're creating images which building the history too, right? And I think
thank you.
We've talked about it.
Great.
Okay, so let's keep in touch. I will link all the informations into this podcast, and I'm hoping that at some point we're going to be able to chat again. I would love to talk to you. We can dive deeper in some of those stuff. We just scratched the surface, I think, today.
I agree. That'd be great
stuff, and then we can do it again.
Awesome. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. You too.